Hey, Horror Movie Night, we've got another bonus episode here live at Fantastic Fest, and I'm sitting with Joe of Vinegar Syndrome.
Hello.
So you guys actually had a pseudo premiere, I guess you could say, with Tammy and the T-Rex playing this week. Can you tell me a little bit about how you guys got your hands on this amazing gory cut of this kind of bad PG-13 movie from the 90s?
I don't think it's a bad movie. I think that if you go into it with the understanding that everyone involved with its creation knew exactly what they were making, it's very effective for accurately executing a movie of that type.
I agree. So I wasn't here in time to see the actual screening, but they put it up on the press room screening section. And I watched it the other day as soon as I saw it was available because I've been wanting to see it for years. And it's got all the makings of one of those perfect midnight movies. Like it's one that I think will be screened at a lot of theaters over the years because it has all the things that you look for in like one of those memorably gory, fun movies.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's one of the... So I'm going to paraphrase the origins of it through what Brett Bird told me and then pick it up with where I got involved. So Brett is one of the people at AGFA, American Genre Film Archive, and they handle all of our theatrical distribution. And so my first exposure to the movie came at an event that Brett did a couple years ago in LA called the 5 Minutes Game, which is basically a video version of the Alamo Reel 1 parties, where you watch the first 5 minutes of 15 movies, and then everyone has a ballot and vote for your favorites.
Okay.
So Tammy won that event, and I thought the first 5 minutes were completely insufferable.
Yeah, it's the worst part of the movie.
Yeah, exactly. So I did not vote for it, and I was like annoyed that it won. And I was ready to leave, and Brett said, "No, stay for this. I think you might actually get something out of it." So I did, and basically the part that it started to warm me over was when Paul Walker gets mauled. And it wasn't because of this was the PG-13 version, so it wasn't because it was particularly violent or anything like that, but
it's just so insanely left field.
Yeah, at that moment it sort of dawned on me like, okay, this movie has so far felt like the sort of garbage that Nickelodeon and the Disney Channel churned out around this time that I wasn't interested in then and I'm not interested in now. And then when it started to get genuinely mean and have this sort of undercurrent of nastiness, I became intrigued, because that's much more my speed when it comes to movies. So I watched the rest of it, and it was good, but it felt like something was off about it. So afterwards I was talking to a friend of mine, and he mentioned in passing, there's supposedly a longer version that has 10 minutes of additional gore and killings. And so that got me intrigued, and I very easily found a copy of that extended, or not extended, it was the original cut actually, but that original cut. And that made me, that won me over. So seeing it as this mean-spirited, and it really kind of is mean-spirited.
It's very, it feels like a Frank Henenlotter movie at a lot of points. It's got a little bit of that Frankenhooker, it's fun, but what's happening is actually very mean-spirited throughout.
Yeah, and I was fascinated by this juxtaposition of family film structure and gore.
Yeah.
And how it never stops feeling like a kid's film even when the gore happens. And that's something very distinctive. There's a bunch of sleazy family films and things like that, but they never go so far in terms of the crassness or the violence. And this film managed to achieve both that level of this is a bizarrely sleazy children's movie, but it's also not, because it has all of these patently exploitation elements, both in terms of the violence and like the sexual humor and the overall implied raunch factor. So basically from that, to cut this rant short, a film collector friend of mine, a few months later after I hit a brick wall trying to figure out the rights, alerted me to some material that he had come across, which reignited my interest in it. And at that point, I just mentioned it to a guy who I've worked with who's done broadcast sales, and he said, "Oh, I used to rep that film in the 90s."
Okay.
So it turned out, totally coincidentally, that this guy who I've been working with for years knew the owner.
Yeah.
So that it
opened up
pretty,
the doors.
Yeah, it was pretty simple from there. But in terms of before that screening where I saw it, the screening that Brett did that I saw it at, apparently this has a history with the Alamo, where this guy named Zach had been recommended the movie by a friend of his who apparently was so drunk at the time he later on did not remember recommending the movie and had never even seen the movie. He'd just seen a trailer for it. So Zach recommended it to people at AGFA and in the video department, and then they ended up playing it at the Draft House chain for their Video Vortex event. Again, this is all 13 cut.
Yeah.
And it was apparently the most successful and popular Video Vortex in the history of the series. So that was what brought it to Brett's attention. So it's like all very interwoven, like a lot of, everyone being in the right place at the right time, or just saying something that spurs someone else to do it. Like if Zane's friend hadn't been drunk, he wouldn't have recommended it to Zane. If Brett hadn't been involved with Draft House, he probably would have never heard of it. If I hadn't been at the screening because I knew Brett, I probably would have never seen it. If my friend John hadn't also been at the screening and noted that there was a gore cut, I wouldn't have probably pursued it, and I probably wouldn't have any idea who owned it still if I didn't happen to have already coincidentally known the former agent.
Yeah,
so
it's so wild.
It's all very serendipitous.
But it's such a perfect Vinegar Syndrome film, like at the same time. Because I think, I mean, I'm going to make an assumption here, but I'm going to guess that you kind of feel in the same vein that, we have a bunch of these different companies that are putting out these Blu-rays of films from the past, and each one has their own special niche. And I feel like Vinegar Syndrome definitely is, to me, if I'm looking for something that's a little bit more exploitative, a little bit more kind of in your face and infamous, I guess is the word I'm looking for. You're kind of the company for that. You kind of look for those films that fall into that kind of category of infamously known as being a little bit more shocking and pushing the boundaries a little bit more.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever thought in terms of acquisitions, I'm not trying to be shocking or boundary pushing per se in terms of what I acquire. It just happens to be a reflection in part, because I'm not the only person who ever suggests films or buys films for the company, but a lot of what we've put out is somewhat of a reflection of my cinematic sensibilities.
Okay.
So it always kind of surprises me when people talk about the films that we've released as, well, in the terms that you're describing them in, because to me they're not that shocking. I mean, I guess perhaps that speaks to the jadedness of my sensibilities, but I just want to be entertained and engaged, and I can enjoy a slow, talky character study with no exploitation elements just as much as a complete trash fest, as long as there's something in these films that captures you.
Okay.
I mean, in terms of the audience, I think that the majority of our customer base wants things that are more absurd, over the top, sleazy, perhaps violent, but I don't think that necessarily makes a film better. It can
It needs to be a good movie still.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, there's plenty of films that are not good movies where some aspect of them, whether it's like good special effects or just like a weird plot or something like that, can elevate them and make them more intriguing and engaging than they deserve to be, because beyond those handful of exploitation elements, they're just dull.
Yeah.
But I've tried to straddle that middle road, I guess. Yeah, I'm not going to pretend that everything that we put out is good, because there's a bunch of titles that I am genuinely embarrassed to have been associated with. But for the most part, I feel like the mantra of the company is and always has been, even as we evolve and find different trends for what people actually want to see, and therefore acquire films accordingly, because that's also a consideration no matter what. There's plenty of great movies that I would love to put out that I know no one would ever buy.
Yeah.
And then there's plenty of shitty movies that I have no interest in putting out, but I know they'll sell, so I'm kind of stuck the one for me, two for them sensibility sometimes.
But that's, you get your own little victories in that one for me, two for them, because you get the one for you every once in a while.
Yeah. But no, I'm happy with the majority of what we've released, because it's all, the goal of the company has always been to basically place all types of film on an equal platform.
Okay.
We're not saying that this is highbrow, this is lowbrow, this is good, this is bad. I don't believe in irony. I don't believe in a so bad it's good mentality. If you're entertained, if you're engaged, if you're enjoying yourself, even if it's technically not well structured or well made, it can't be bad because you're engaged.
So one last question for you is, I feel like with pretty much anybody in the distribution game, I find that there's at least one title that they adore that they feel like doesn't get enough love on their table. Do you have a title that, if someone came up and said, what do you suggest, that you would push pretty hard because you love it and you feel like no one's really giving it the attention that it deserves?
There's a bunch like that, sadly. I would say perhaps for the last calendar year or so, a film that I really love that got people who've seen it tend to like it, but has not gotten the level of views that I think it deserves, is Shot.
Okay.
It's a film made for about $10,000 to $15,000 by University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign students, and despite its very low budget, it's an extremely ambitious, both technically, structurally, and in terms of locations and just the level of expertise being demonstrated for a first-time effort. That's basically a French Connection inspired French New Wave hybrid. So lots of meandering, semi-improvised seeming dialogue sequences interspersed with very well choreographed chase sequences and loads of helicopter shots and so on. It's a fascinating film. It barely got released on video, never came out on disc, and the director had the negative sitting in his closet for decades, never made another film.
Jesus, okay. Well, guys, go hit up Vinegar Syndrome. Definitely get your pre-order of Tammy and the T-Rex, but while you're checking out, maybe click Shot as well. Grab a copy of that. Thank you so much, Joe, for your time.
Yeah, happy to do it.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.